Discover 8 sinister encounters from haunted Kentucky homes, unexplainable and spine-chilling. The sun dipped low, casting shadows like gnarled fingers across Sarah's new Victorian home. She smiled weakly, trying to give her 2 kids an encouraging nod. Each creak of the old wooden steps echoed a dissonant welcome, but Sarah brushed it off. This was their fresh start. The picturesque hills cradled the charming abode, promising safety. Mr. Jenkins, the neighbor with the warm smile, waved enthusiastically, but unease squirmed in the pit of her stomach, a worm she couldn't shake. That first night, the wind howled, rattling the windows, sending a chill straight to her bones. Shadows scuttled swiftly across walls, laughter, ghostly and chilling, bubbled up from the depths of the dark corners. The kids giggled nervously, but the laughter made Sarah's heart race. It felt alive. "It's just an old house adjusting to us," she reassured them, even as goosebumps raised on her arms. But what was that? A ripple creased the wallpaper in the hallway, as if some unseen force was breathing against it. Was the air turning cold in waves, or was it just her anxiety? And then, whispers, like secrets passed among the dead, slithered through the corridors. She stalled, her heart pounding like a train derailing. The charming home felt less charming by the second. She tried to shake off the fear while unpacking the attic, but there it was. An ancient, dusty book hidden beneath the floorboards, pages cracked and yellowed. Folklore about the house, tales of a woman who had vanished decades ago, drowned in darkness and left behind only whispers of her pain. The hairs on Sarah's neck rose. She read through the stories, twisted and gnarled like the branches outside. Suddenly, shadows took on a sinister shape. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. The truth began to weigh heavily on her, each revelation twisting her insides further. The townsfolk had secrets, a dark history of abuse masked by polite smiles and barbecues. Each conversation with Mr. Jenkins twisted her stomach, his kindness glaring against the dark backdrop encasing her life. He was always just a little too close, his eyes gleaming with a glint she couldn't shake. She felt the walls closing in, as if the house itself was squeezing the air from her lungs. Sarah's desperation grew. She sought out other neighbors, local authorities, trying to paint the picture of the terror enveloping her. Laughter echoed in the dead of night. The whispers grew louder. Even as she explained her fears to the dismissive faces around her, she felt the creeping dread turn into isolation, and then, one darkened evening, shadows morphed into silhouettes behind the curtains. They watched her. The laughter turned into howls. She trembled, clutching her children tight. She glanced around, desperate. Would they vanish next? Was she trapped? The figures danced just out of reach, and as she readied herself to confront the truth, a cold, gusty draft swept through, pushing her towards the doorway with a sudden, terrifying urgency. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock, echoing in the oppressive fear that grasped her heart. Blood ran cold in her veins. Could it be more of the folklore? Had it come for her? She wondered if she and her children would become part of the next chapter in their town's dark history. As dread coiled around her chest, the fear left her breath hitched, wondering who, or what, lay just beyond her door. The knock sounded again. Sharp. Unyielding. It hung in the air, filled with a heavy silence that made Sarah's heart race. She pressed her back against the wall, her children huddled close beside her. Their wide eyes mirrored her own fear, the innocence of youth shrouded in a shadowy veil of uncertainty. "Mommy, who is it?" whispered Emily, her tiny voice quaking. Sarah didn't know. She had expected to find safety here, but now, standing on the threshold of what could be danger, her mind raced for an explanation, a reason to keep her family safe. Stay here, she replied, her voice trembling but firm. The sheer weight of dread pushed her forward. She felt the walls whispering, clawing at her resolve, urging her to turn back. But the urgency behind it demanded her attention. Taking a deep breath, she creaked the door open a fraction. Darkness spilled into the hallway like smoke, thick and unnatural. For a moment, she saw nothing. The porch was empty, yet the shadows seemed to pulse. Was someone there? Or was it just her imagination, fueled by fear? Then she heard a soft, reluctant shuffle. Sarah's grip tightened on the door. "Who's there?" she called, her voice wavering. "Just me," came a voice, barely above a whisper. It was tinged with unfamiliar sorrow and an unmistakable urgency. It was Mr. Jenkins. She felt relief. Instead, a shiver cascaded down her spine. "What do you want?" she asked warily. "It's not safe," he replied, glancing over his shoulder, eyes wide, haunted. "You have to listen. There's something in your house." "What?" "Not here," he hissed, stepping closer. "You need to come with me now." Her instincts screamed at her to slam the door, but curiosity and dread gripped her. "What do you mean? What is going on? Please." His voice cracked. The kids before he could finish, another gust of chilling wind swept through, wrapping icy tendrils around Sarah's ankles. The door shuddered, rattling against its frame. Her children whimpered beside her. "Mommy." Daniel's voice shook with the tremors of fear. Maybe we should," she said, glancing back at her kids. They were terrified, eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. The laughter and whispers had risen to a cacophony in her mind, a dark symphony taunting her, urging her to flee. "Stay close," she murmured, exhaling the little courage she had left. As Sarah took a step outside, the air felt thick, compressing around her like a vice. But once on the porch, she froze. An unnatural stillness enveloped everything. The night had gone silent, the wind dying to a breathless pause. An overwhelming sense of being watched washed over her. "What are we doing, Mr. Jenkins?" she demanded, trying to mask her rising anxiety. "Follow me," he urged, glancing behind him into the shrouded darkness. "We don't have much time." Then, without warning, something shifted. The atmosphere felt charged, electric. In the blink of an eye, the shadows lengthened before her. Figures emerged from the depths of the darkness, a twisted throng of pale, unblinking faces distorted by fear. "Run!" Mr. Jenkins shouted, panic erupting into a scream. In that moment, all rational thought fled. Sarah grabbed her children and dashed after him, heart pounding, breath ragged. A desperate escape into the unknown, pursued by something primal and insatiable. As they barreled down the winding path, the shadows twisted into nightmarish shapes, ethereal fingers grasping at them, almost reaching. What had they unleashed? What darkness pursued them? And would they survive whatever monsters awaited in the depths of the night? The ground was uneven beneath their feet as they pounded down the path, the chill of the night wrapping around them like a suffocating shroud. Sarah could hear nothing but the frantic thud of her heart and the soft whimpers of her children. The darkness was alive, swirling around them, and with each hurried step, shadows seemed to stretch out greedily, reaching for what they could not catch. "Faster! You have to run faster!" Mr. Jenkins called out. His voice was laced with terror, pulling Sarah from the suffocating fog of her thoughts. But where were they going? What was chasing them? The trees formed a twisted archway above, their gnarled branches clawing at the night sky. As they raced past, it felt as if the very forest was watching, silent witnesses to their flight. The air buzzed with an unholy energy, every whisper of wind a warning. "Mommy! I'm scared!" Emily cried, pulling at Sarah's hand. "I know, sweetheart. Just hold on tight." Sarah gasped, pushing her legs harder, her lungs burning. The path opened suddenly, revealing a worn-out clearing lit only by the ominous glow of the moon. She skidded to a stop, breath coming in frantic gasps. What now? Panic clawed at her throat. Mr. Jenkins's face was pale, a ghost of the man she had known just moments before. There's a cabin. He pointed tremblingly to an old structure. The wood was dark, almost blackened, as if charred by the very fear that permeated the air. We can hide there. But we have to move. Before she could respond, a dreadful noise pierced the stillness, a wailing, shrill and haunting, echoing from the trees. It was a sound that belonged in a nightmare, a cry that twisted the spine and made skin crawl. Go! Go! Mr. Jenkins urged, already sprinting toward the cabin. Sarah turned to grab her children. Daniel pressed against her thigh, clutching her like a lifeline, his face buried in her side. Emily's small fingers gripped her hand. They ran again, adrenaline surging as they pushed through the underbrush, a primal drive propelling them forward, but the shadows danced in the corner of her vision, flickering with unnatural light. With every heartbeat, she felt that lurking presence draw closer. A sensation of cold invaded her bones, wrapping icy fingers around her heart. They reached the cabin door, old and splintered, doubt swirling in Sarah's mind. Would they truly be safe inside? With a final shove, she threw the door open and rushed her children in, following quickly. The air inside was stale, heavy with a scent of rot. Cobwebs hung like curtains, draping the dark corners. Sarah's instinct screamed to leave, but time slipped through her fingers like sand. Lock it! Mr. Jenkins cried, fumbling with the door behind them, his breathing desperate. Sarah rushed to the door, pulling it shut with a loud groan that echoed ominously in the confined space. The latch clicked into place, but her eyes darted around the dim interior. A single flickering light illuminated a room full of broken furniture and shadows, casting eerie shapes on the walls, and then, it came again, the wailing. Closer this time. It spiraled into a chaos of cries, a chorus of anguish that rattled the very bones of the cabin. What is that? Daniel whispered, shaking uncontrollably. Mr. Jenkins stood rigid at the door, eyes wide, forehead slick with sweat. We need to get to the basement. It's our only chance. Basement? Sarah's voice wavered. What's in the basement? But as the wailing grew louder, as if an invisible storm raged outside, she could sense the urgency crackling in the air along with their fear. Now! He pushed her toward what looked like a trapdoor set into the floor. Shivers crept down her spine as she glanced once more behind her, the cabin trembling under the force of whatever hunted them outside. Would the basement be a sanctuary or the mouth of a deeper darkness? They had to find out, before whatever lingered outside caught up with them. The trapdoor creaked open under Mr. Jenkins's frantic hands. Dust billowed out like ghostly fog, and a stale, musty odor wafted up, mingling with the fear tightening Sarah's throat. She hesitated, but the wailing from outside intensified, a relentless surge of desperation that demanded action. Go! Jenkins's voice sliced through the air, and he shoved Emily ahead of him into the gaping darkness. Daniel, in! Sarah urged, nudging her son forward, her heart pounding louder than the cries outside. She followed, dropping into the abyss, the cold air wrapping around her like an icy embrace. The basement was claustrophobic, a claustrophobic black hole filled with scattered debris that crunched underfoot. Sarah quickly glanced around. A weak beam of moonlight penetrated through a small window, casting ominous shapes against the damp walls. Unruly shadows danced, mocking their fear. Is it safe? Emily whispered, her small voice quavering as she huddled close to Sarah. As if in answer, the wailing escalated to an ear-splitting shriek, magnified by the wooden walls, echoing through their very bones. Sarah pressed her hands against her children's mouths to stifle any whimper, the primal urge to shield them battling against the horror threatening to invade their refuge. Jenkins frantically searched the room, his breaths raspy. We need to hide, he said, scanning for a safe corner. It felt like the walls themselves were closing in, a suffocating spiral of dread spiraling tighter with every second. Over here. He pointed to the far end of the basement, where a rotting wooden staircase descended further into darkness. The faint smell of decay hung in the air like a noxious fog. "What's down there?" Daniel asked, eyes wide with fear. "Don't know. But it's better than this," Jenkins retorted, glancing toward the trapdoor. Above, the wailing reached a fever pitch, sounding almost human. Panic ignited in Sarah as she felt the urges stir again. They couldn't stay, something dreadful would soon push through that door. "Come on." Sarah pulled her children along, dread coiling tightly around her heart. The more they heard, the more it felt like some dreadful entity was drawing closer, eager to claim them. As they reached the steps, the wailing morphed, a haunting blend of cries morphing into anguished laughter. "What is that?" Sarah's voice broke, her thoughts tumbling into the urge to flee back to the trapdoor. But she knew there was nowhere left to run. "Keep your heads down," Jenkins ordered, leading the way down an unsettling descent where the wooden steps creaked ominously, like the groaning of a long-forgotten soul. As they pushed further into the suffocating dark, Sarah felt around, the rough wood grazing her fingertips, an abysmal chill creeping over her skin. The basement opened into a larger, darker chamber. No light reached this place. It smelled of damp earth, an unsettling musk that clawed at her senses. Whispers began to curl around her ears like tendrils, seductive yet horrifying. Unintelligible phrases beckoned from the shadows. "Can you hear that?" Daniel shivered, his eyes darting around the darkness, skin prickling as though 1,000 eyes were studying their every move. Suddenly, the laughter from above stopped. Silence enveloped them, deafening and heavy. Sarah's heart raced, drowning out the frantic whispers around them. She turned toward Jenkins, desperate for assurance. Instead, his eyes were wide, frozen in terror as he gestured vigorously towards a tattered blanket draped in one corner. "What's there?" she breathed, dread pooling in her stomach. Jenkins stepped closer, nudging the blanket aside with trembling fingers. A pulsating darkness lay beneath it, radiating an unholy energy, a sinister presence that sent pins and needles across Sarah's skin. "I don't know what that is," he stammered. Before anyone could react, a bone-chilling scream erupted from the trapdoor above as a shadow surged in, the last remnants of something horrific breaking into their sanctuary. "Run!" Sarah screamed, her voice fighting against the chaos, sure it would soon be too late. But what awaited them in the depths of that basement? The chilling cries of the unwelcome still lingered as they turned to face the lurking terror. They sprinted into the depths, the darkness swallowing them whole as fear propelled their every frantic step. The shriek from above reverberated in Sarah's bones, a reminder of the terrible fate waiting just a few feet away. The world above was a violent cacophony of madness, but down here, the silence was deeper, more unsettling. Jenkins led them into the chamber, his breath uneven, eyes darting to the unseen corners of the room. The whispers intensified, curling around them like vines. It was impossible to ignore. Each hushed word felt like a taunt. "Stay close," Sarah urged, feeling the weight of her children's hands slipping with every tremor of terror that washed over them. Daniel's small body trembled as he pressed close to her, his wide eyes scanning the shadows. "Mom, I don't like this place." "It's okay, honey. We'll find a way out," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, but even she felt the frayed edges of her hope. The air was thick, suffocating. A trickle of cold sweat ran down Sarah's back as the darkness pressed in, and then, without warning, footsteps echoed from the corridor leading into the chamber. The sound was unmistakable, heavy and deliberate, like a predator stalking in the dark. "Hide!" Jenkins hissed, pushing them roughly behind a decrepit pile of old crates. Emily clamped her tiny hands over her mouth, muffling a whimper. Just then, a ghostly figure materialized in the fading light from the doorway, a woman, draped in tattered gray. Her face was pale as bone, with eyes sunken in deep hollows that radiated madness. She stood motionless, surveying the chamber, tilting her head as if trying to listen. Who is that?" Daniel breathed, the question escaping his lips in a terrified gasp. "I don't know," Sarah whispered back, every instinct screaming to flee, but her feet were glued to the cold ground. A whisper of dread settled over her, making her chest feel tight. The figure stepped deeper into the chamber. With each movement, the whispers grew louder, becoming a frenzied din, as if encouraged by her presence. "Why can't you hear me?" The apparition murmured, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind, echoing through the darkness. "They need you. You cannot leave." Jenkins clenched his fists, visibly shaken. "This is bad. This is really bad." "Just don't move," Sarah said, forcing her rigid body to remain still. Her heart raced, each beat pounding like a drum in her ears. The woman turned suddenly toward them, her eyes gleaming with an unnatural light, as if she could see them despite the shadows. "You cannot escape the call. They've been waiting." A shriek erupted behind her, tearing through the chamber, sending a wave of paralyzing terror crashing over them. Sounds clattered like bones rattling in a grave, and the figure's features twisted into a dreadful smile. "We're not here to hurt you," Jenkins called, his voice trembling. "We're just trying to get away." She laughed, a sound so horrifying it felt like shards of ice stabbing into Sarah's heart. "You wish to leave? This place is your own." With one swift movement, the woman lunged toward them, hands outstretched, fingers curling like talons. "Run!" Sarah shouted. They bolted from their hiding place, adrenaline pumping like a shot of electricity. Daniel and Emily followed closely, the echoes of their pounding footsteps mingling with the woman's chilling laughter. As they raced toward the far wall, there was a sudden lurch beneath their feet. The ground shook, dust filling the air as the room trembled like a living thing. What they hadn't noticed, a trapdoor, just like the one above, had revealed itself behind the shadows, a gaping maw ready to swallow them whole. "Jump!" Jenkins yelled. In the blink of an eye, they flung themselves forward, plunging into the darkness once more. As Sarah fell, for a fleeting moment she felt the looming specter of despair clinging to her thoughts, telling her they'd never escape. What awaited them at the bottom? The whispers reached a fever pitch, echoing in the recesses of her mind, twisting her thoughts into a web of horror. Desperate breaths filled the air as they landed in yet another unknown, fear washing over them anew, but this time, they'd awakened something, or maybe it never truly slept. Would they survive this descent, or had they awakened a darkness hungry for their souls? They hit the ground hard, a thud that resonated through the darkness like the strike of a hammer on iron. Sarah's heart raced uncontrollably, her breath catching as she struggled to regain her footing. Daniel's grip on her tightened, and she felt Emily trembling beside her, a fragile leaf caught in a storm. "No! Get up!" Jenkins urged, his voice raw with urgency as he scanned their surroundings. The darkness felt alive, pulsating with a foreboding energy. They were trapped in a narrow corridor drenched in shadows, the air thick with an oppressive dread. "Where are we?" Sarah whispered, panic clawing at her throat. "Just keep moving," Jenkins replied tersely, stepping backward to guide their retreat. His eyes darted, seeking any flicker of light, anything that could lead them to safety. The whispers returned like an unsettling lullaby, a chilling murmur promising secrets, betrayal, and entrapment. As they shuffled deeper into the corridor, Sarah's instinct screamed at her to stop. The walls seemed to pulse closer, a tightening embrace. "Maybe we should turn back," she stammered. "No. We can't go back now. We have to find a way out," Jenkins snapped, his voice carrying an edge of desperation. A sudden chill washed over them, and Sarah instinctively wrapped her arms around her children. Was it colder down here, or was it just the weight of fear pressing in on them? Moments later, a scuttling noise echoed from further down the hall like claws scratching against stone. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Shoo, stay quiet," Jenkins hissed. Daniel's eyes were wide with terror as he pulled on Sarah's sleeve. "I'm scared, Mom. I know, baby. Just stay close. Her voice shook. Each passing second felt like an eternity, tinged with uncertainty. Something wasn't right. Suddenly, the corridor opened up into a cavernous space, dimly lit by something glimmering at the far end, a flickering shadow, dancing. With a hesitant step, they moved forward, each footfall echoing ominously against the stone floor. Then, without warning, the whispers intensified, rising to a deafening crescendo. The air crackled, heavy with malevolence. The glimmering light revealed itself to be a pool of dark water, strangely calm amidst the chaos around them. What is that? Sarah breathed, inching closer, compelled by a force she couldn't identify. It's just water, Daniel ventured, but dread coated the edges of his voice. Don't get too close. Jenkins cautioned, but it was too late. Sarah felt the pull, an almost magnetic allure. She inched forward, and when she leaned over to peer into the depths, the reflection that stared back at her was not her own. The face that greeted her was twisted, mouths forming silent screams, and eyes that glistened with sorrow and anguish. No! Sarah screamed, stumbling back, heart hammering against her ribs. She turned, but Jenkins and the kids were paralyzed, gazing into the abyss of the pool. Look! Jenkins whispered, as the shadows from the walls seemed to coalesce into forms, writhing and swirling. The air thickened with unseen eyes watching, waiting. Run! We can't stay here. She grabbed Daniel and Emily, yanking them away, forcing them to break the terrifying spell. But when Sarah turned to drag Jenkins with them, he was no longer there. Jenkins! Panic surged through her. The whispers crescendoed into tumultuous fury, a cacophony of lost souls clamoring for release. Mom, where is he? Daniel's voice wavered, pulling her back from the brink of hysteria. We have to go. Now. As they turned to flee, the ground beneath them trembled. The faces in the water morphed, reaching out like the bony fingers of the dead, and the whispers became a chaotic roar. Forcing her feet to move, Sarah pushed her children ahead, ready to sacrifice anything to protect them. But as they dashed away, another horrific realization tore through her. Whatever they had awakened now roared with hunger, and a single truth loomed: they were not alone. As the echoes of Jenkins' cries faded into the darkness, an ominous question loomed in her mind: would they ever find a way back, or would they be consumed by the shadows that had awoken? They sprinted through the corridor, breathless and desperate. The whispers still taunted them, growing louder with each frantic step. Shadows darted at the edges of their vision, teasing Sarah with brief glimpses of movement. She felt her heartbeat thump in her ears, a violent drum echoing her fear. Mom! I can't keep running. Daniel gasped, struggling to keep up. Just a little longer. She urged, desperation clawing her voice. She dared a glance back, and her stomach dropped. The darkness twisted and churned behind them, as if alive, stretching and reaching, hungry for their warmth and breath. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted, hardening as they moved. What's happening? She shouted, her heart racing even faster. It's trying to trap us. Emily shrieked, grabbing Sarah's hand tightly. Sarah could see the panic smoldering in her daughter's eyes, and it ignited her own fear. They plunged forward, racing past jagged edges and treacherous shadows. An echo of Jenkins' voice, faint yet filled with agony, seemed to trail after them. Help! Came the whisper, just on the brink of recognition. Mom, what about Jenkins? Daniel blurted out, his voice trembling. We have to keep going. He wouldn't want us to stop. She shot back, though doubt gnawed at her mind. Ahead, the corridor split into two paths, both veiled in darkness. Which way? The whispers from behind grew urgent, breathy, beckoning her to turn, while cold winds swept through the corridor, sending a shiver up her spine. Left or right? She asked, panicked. Right! Daniel shouted, pulling her toward that direction. They darted into the right passage, the shadows pressing tighter around them. The walls vibrated with sinister energy, and the air felt thick with despair. Something in Sarah screamed that they were being watched, hunted. She glanced at Emily, who looked pale, her eyes wide with terror, and felt a wave of resolve. She couldn't let her children down. "Keep going," she urged, pushing them forward, but speed was becoming a fleeting whim. The passage narrowed further, their only salvation was to keep pushing ahead. With a baleful screech, a disembodied voice echoed, "You cannot escape." Sarah turned. Just behind them, a shape flickered in and out of sight, a stretch of cloth, a figure obscured by swirling shadows. It lunged forward, a furious tempest of whispers and fury. "Run!" They barreled forward, feet pounding against the stone floor. Toby's voice melded into a haunting wail that filled the air. Sarah felt her heart race faster, each beat a countdown to disaster. "I can't go any further," Daniel cried as they approached another darkened chamber, and Sarah could sense it. The pulsing sensation from the water pool had returned, ripples writhing at the edges of her consciousness. Frantically, she reached for the door at the chamber's entrance, its surface cold and slick under her trembling fingers. They burst through, only to be met with a vast emptiness. "What is this place?" Sarah gasped. A singular beam of light slanted down from above, illuminating twisted branches that crisscrossed like skeletal fingers. It was a grotesque mockery of a forest floor. The scent of damp rot assaulted her, mixing with a sharp tinge of fear. "Mom, I don't like this," Emily whimpered, her voice shaking. "We need to find a way out." But the ground began to tremble beneath them. The shadows thickened, morphing into grotesque forms as the whispers escalated into a frenzy, screeches and cries of torment filling her ears. "Mom, look!" Daniel cried out, pointing. Before them, in the terrifying glow of the singular light, shapes began to materialize, faces, twisted and tormented. They shimmered with pain, mouths forming wordless cries for help, eyes filled with panic and despair. "No, no, no," Sarah breathed. Her heart sank. Each soul was a reminder of what they might become. "Turn back!" A voice boomed, shrouded in stormy rage, as an unseen force crashed against her. As they stumbled backward, the chaotic whispers transformed into an ominous chant, "Join us." They stumbled away from the creeping shadows, pushing through a last door that led them deeper into the unknown. And in that moment, the light flickered and died, plunging them into darkness once more. Sarah, Emily, Daniel. A cry echoed. Was it Jenkins? "Mom, we have to," Daniel whispered, his voice frail and trembling. "What if he is trapped in there?" Emily questioned, despair creeping back into her tone. Just before Sarah could respond, a cold blast of wind swept through the chamber, snatching away the last hint of warmth. A choice loomed ahead: find Jenkins or flee into the unknown. And with a foreboding realization settling over them, darkness beckoned, for one could lead to salvation, but the other to oblivion. The darkness wrapped around them like a suffocating blanket. Sarah's breath was shallow, anxiety clawing at her throat. Where was Jenkins? Was he close? Or had they already lost him to the shadows? "Mom, please," Daniel pleaded, his small voice barely piercing the veil of silence. "We have to get out of here." With a quick nod, she took a step forward, heart pounding in rhythm with the chaos echoing in her mind. Each movement felt like a betrayal of hope. The chill surrounding them gnawed at their skin, but Sarah pressed on, driven by a fierce desire to protect her children. Light flickered back to life, a dim, sputtering glow. The chamber expanded, revealing grotesque murals painted on the walls. Dark figures twisted and writhed, frozen in eternal torment. Each face was familiar, a ghost from her past. Friends, neighbors, those who had gone missing, who whispered of this darkness. "Look, Mom!" Emily cried, her voice echoing. They're crying. Sarah's heart raced. The eyes of the painted faces seemed to weep real tears, drawing her in, drowning her in their despair. Don't look, don't look, she urged, pulling her children closer. But her body was caught, rooted, desperate for answers. In a sudden rush, the room shook violently, and the faces lurched forward, their mouths stretching and distorting in silent screams. For a moment, Sarah felt their pain resonate deep within her, as if she too were being pulled into their empty void. What do you want? She shouted into the growing chaos, the words clawing their way out of her throat. But the whispers evolved again, morphing into a musky gale that rattled the very foundation of this nightmare. Join us, join us, join us, run! She shrieked, tearing away from the mural that threatened to claim her. The room whirled as she yanked Emily and Daniel, pushing them toward what she could only hope was an exit. They stumbled through another door, crashing into a hallway pulsing with life, even if that life was tainted. Guttural growls resonated around them, thick with dark intent. A choking fog slithered over the ground like creeping hands intent on ensnaring their ankles. Mom, I can't see. Daniel cried, fear ringing his voice. Stick close. I can't lose you. As they fled, the fog grew thicker and darker, swallowing sounds and thoughts. Shadows danced just outside their periphery, screeching and laughing as they chased. Heart pounding, Sarah glanced back for just a moment. What loomed in the darkness sent shivers through her spine. Figures the same distorted faces from before had slipped into the corridor, reaching out with cold, skeletal hands. The terrifying chorus grew louder, almost pleading, join us, become one with us. No. Sarah screamed. You can't have us. Ahead, she spotted an eerie shimmer at the end of the hall, a sliver of light against the twilight of shadows. Hope ignited briefly in her chest. They surged toward it, but the ground beneath them trembled with fury, shifting and buckling as if the earth itself conspired against their escape. A heavy gust knocked them off balance. The figures writhed closer, their elongated fingers stretching, grasping, begging for company. The air crackled with a dark energy that threatened to consume them all. Hold on to me, Sarah cried, wrapping a protective arm around her children. Just as they neared the light, the chamber exploded into chaos. Shadows collided, whispering secrets, promising salvation and doom in equal measure. The overwhelming darkness swallowed the light. But the whisper returned intense and hissing, barely more than a breath. You cannot escape, not alone. Suddenly, the air turned electric, and Sarah felt the weight of unseen eyes closing in, suffocating her will. A chilling realization washed over her, even if they escaped now, what lay beyond the darkness waited with open arms. Mom. Emily's voice wobbled, a thin thread through the storm of horror. Just keep fighting. Sarah growled through gritted teeth, shoving forward into the suffocating darkness. But then, in the heart of the chaos, a piercing scream rang out, Jenkins' voice, filled with anguish and despair. Help me. A decision crystallized in that moment, a collision of love and fear. Find Jenkins? Or push through? With the shadows closing in, a truth whispered through the fog, everything they loved could slip away, or be lost forever. Mom. The urgency in Daniel's voice snapped Sarah back to the present. The flickering glow from the shimmering light was fading, the shadows clawing at its fringes. Panic surged within her, escalating with every heavy breath. Run. Keep running, she commanded, her voice hoarse and strained. Racing toward the light, her heart drummed wildly. Could they really make it? How could they escape from what lurked in the darkness? As they barreled forward, the shadows seemed to swallow their hope. The voices grew louder, swirling around them in a cacophony of anguish. Join us, join us. The weeping faces flared into her mind, each one a memory, a reminder of those lost. No. Sarah shouted, fierce desperation igniting her fear. We want to be like them. We want to. The ground shifted again beneath their feet, the darkness quaking as though alive. Cold dread curled in the pit of her stomach. They were losing the fight. They were a sharp turn. Sarah yanked the kids down a narrow space dividing the shifting walls. Her hand brushed against something slick and pulsing. She recoiled, but there was no time for fear. The echo of footsteps drifted in from behind, drawing nearer, taunting. Faster! She urged, pushing Daniel and Emily ahead. They raced down the corridor, shadows licking at their heels, whispering promises of eternity, of release. Then the silvery light brightened once more, and with it, the faint outline of an exit door. Hope surged again. There. We can make it. Suddenly, the air thickened. Sarah stumbled, gasping as an icy tendril slithered around her ankle. She looked down, horror flooding her senses, the same skeletal fingers from the murals gripping tight, pulling her back into the darkness. "Mom!" Daniel yelled, tears streaking down his face. He grabbed her hand, his small fingers squeezing with every ounce of strength. "I want to let go." Sarah cried, fighting against the pull, the terror threatening to engulf them. She could feel the pain of the trapped faces inside her, their despair mingling with her own. "Together!" Emily shouted, sensing the shift in the grip of the shadows. "We pull together." Summoning every ounce of courage, Sarah slipped 1 foot forward. "On 3." She gasped. 1, 2, 3. They yanked, their small bodies straining against the dark. For a brief second, the grip loosened, the shadows recoiling as though repelled. "Run!" Sarah shouted again, their feet pounding on the ground, lungs burning as they barreled toward the door. But just as they reached for the handle, a blood-curdling wail echoed behind them. Jenkins' voice, raw and desperate. "Help me! Sarah!" Time halted, her heartbeat reverberated like thunder in her ears. Jenkins was close, dangerously close, lost in the dark, fighting against the same fate that threatened her family. "Mom, we have to help him." Daniel pleaded, his small eyes wide with fear. "No!" Sarah cried, a maelstrom of emotions fighting in her chest. "If we stop, we'll lose everything. I can't leave him." Emily's voice cracked, pure and unyielding. With a shudder, Sarah realized the choice was not hers alone to make. The shadows shifted around them, almost urging her to decide. To give into the abyss. Heart pounding and life tasting of ash, she glanced at her children, their faces pale but resolute. Could she risk everything? "Mom!" The desperate cry pulled her focus back to the door. Was it a chance or an illusion? A gateway to freedom or a trap? The darkness loomed closer, closing in as Jenkins' cries grew fainter, his plight pulling at something deep within her. "Help him join us," the shadows encroached, eager, pleading. A snapshot of those once vibrant faces flashed in her mind, haunting yet familiar. "What will you choose, Sarah? Will you keep running, or will you get him?" Right then, a choice lay bare before them, a question that demanded an answer amidst the chaos. The weight of it settled hard on her chest. Life or death? Family or sacrifice? "Mom! Please!" With one last glance at the dazzling glimmer leaking through the door, Sarah knew they stood at a precipice. Which way would they go, and what horrors awaited on either side? The swirling shadows danced angrily at the edges of the hallway. Sarah's breath was quickening, not just from fear but from an aching decision. Every part of her screamed to run, to flee with her children into the safety of the light beyond the door. But Jenkins' terrified, desperate voice echoed in her mind, pulling at her heart, demanding her attention as he had always done since they first met. "Mom!" Emily pleaded, panic straining her usually sweet voice. "We can't leave him." In that moment, Sarah's heart sank. The tug-of-war tearing through her was more horrific than any specter lurking in the dark. Whatever they had awakened deserved to be confronted. Jenkins had been there for her. Had protected them. They could not forsake his sacrifice. "Okay, we help him." She yelled, each word igniting the fierce love wrapped around her core. "Mom, no!" Daniel cried, squeezing her hand tighter. But Sarah was already moving. "We have to go back," she ordered. With no time to waste, they turned and bolted back down the corridor, shadows licking at their heels. The air chilled more than ever, swirling with despair yet thick with courage and determination. Each step weighed heavy, but the resolve in her heart surprised even her. "Where are you, Jenkins?" she called, her voice echoing through the darkness. Thick mist surrounded them as they rushed through the suffocating shadows. There. Ahead, a figure appeared, indistinct but stumbling, trapped in the shifting darkness. "Jenkins! We're coming!" But the shadows thickened, morphing into tall, menacing forms. They loomed over him, each with hollow eyes that bore into Sarah's soul. Whispering promises of eternal solace, they tried to infiltrate her mind, pulling at the depths of her fear for her children, fear for herself. "Help!" Jenkins shouted, fighting against invisible hands clawing at him. "Please, I can't hold them. They're too strong." With renewed fervor, Sarah surged forward. "Hold on, Jenkins!" she shouted, urging her kids with every ounce of strength to push through the shadows clutching at them like tendrils. As they neared him, the darkness seemed to recoil, shocked at the raw determination pulsing in their hearts. Encouraged by love, Sarah took Daniel and Emily's hands and pressed into Jenkins' side. "Together. We pull together," she gasped, anchoring him as firmly as she could. The three of them took a deep breath, unifying their strength in a desperate physical act of solidarity. 1, 2, 3. Sarah grunted, pulling with every bit of energy. A rumble shook the ground, and bizarrely, the shadows began to withdraw, recoiling as if burned by their fierce light of love and unity. Jenkins' free hand grabbed hold of Sarah's wrist, strength returned to him with the solidarity of the three. "Come on," he urged, gritting his teeth, "we can make it." The ground shuddered violently, a growl echoing as shadows clawed to reclaim their prey. But Sarah surged through, propelled by her children's shrieking cries and the sheer force of their hearts beating for freedom. With a final push, they reached the doorway, light flooding them like warm sunshine breaking through a storm. Sarah held on, squeezing Jenkins' hand as they barreled through as one, tumbling onto the other side, a world that felt so alive and vivid, yet so surreal. After the shadows, they collapsed onto the damp grass, the night air suddenly crisp and fresh. "Is it over?" Emily whispered, eyes wide and earnest. "I think we're safe for now," Sarah gasped, glancing at Jenkins, whose face was pale yet relieved. "We did it, Sarah," he breathed, gratitude flooding the depths of his weary eyes. They embraced fiercely, a tangled mass of gratitude and terror. And for the first time since entering the heart of darkness, they allowed relief to wash over them, stoking the embers of hope that had long flickered within them. Just then, a rustling sound emerged behind them, the shadows weaving a distant threat. "What's happening?" Daniel's little voice wobbled. "Stay close," Sarah urged, feeling fear creeping back. But Jenkins met her gaze. "No matter what comes, we stick together. We'll fight it all together." Instead of fear, determination surged forward once more, an unbreakable bond solidified. Each lingering shadow would try to pull them back, but they were armed with love. As they walked toward the emerging dawn, Sarah realized this was more than just survival. It was reclaiming their story from the darkness. It was rewriting history, hand in hand, heart in heart. But even as the first light of morning broke the horizon, Sarah knew this fight wasn't truly over. There would always be darkness lurking, seeking to reclaim its hold. And every step they took forward would require vigilance, bravery, and unity. With newfound strength, they ventured into the future. Now it's your turn. You need to subscribe now to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will shake you to your core. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and let everyone know these chilling tales continue. Flood the comments section with your reactions. What did you think of this ending? What are your theories? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support matters and lets us keep bringing you this gripping content.